Something extraordinary happened on January 18th, 2026, and almost nobody noticed. It wasn't a market crash. It wasn't a rate decision. It wasn't even about silver, at least not on the surface. It was buried inside a political headline, a throwaway line, a detail most people skipped right past, but that detail may have just broken the global silver market. On January 18th, the United States announced a new policy tied to negotiations over Greenland that alone sounded absurd enough to become a joke, but hidden inside that announcement was something far more serious. A 10% tariff, not on one country, not on one product, but on all imports from 8 European nations, including the United Kingdom, effective February 1st. That single sentence quietly turned the Atlantic Ocean into a tariff wall. And in doing so, it may have destroyed the most important mechanism holding the silver market together. To understand why this matters, you need to understand how silver has been controlled for decades, because silver prices don't behave naturally. They haven't for a very long time. For years, major bullion banks have played a global game of whack-a-mole. Whenever silver prices spiked in one location, they moved metal. New York too tight? Ship silver to London. London running hot? Drain inventory from COMEX. Asia bidding aggressively? Pull metal from Western vaults and flood the market. This worked because silver could move freely. No friction, no penalties, no walls. Just ships, vaults, and balance sheets. The entire paper-silver system depends on one assumption. That metal can always be moved between locations to plug shortages. That assumption is now dead. Because with a 10% tariff in place, silver shipped from the United States to the UK cannot come back without an enormous cost. At $90 silver, that's a $9 per ounce penalty. No bank can arbitrage that. No hedge can absorb that. No balance sheet can pretend that doesn't matter. This is what I call the Roach Motel effect. Silver can check out, but it can never check back in. Once metal leaves the US for London, it's trapped. And once London runs short, there's no longer a lifeline. That alone changes everything. Because London, the LBMA, is already critically low on physical silver. Years of Asian demand have drained it. China, India, Middle East, sovereign buyers. They've been pulling metal eastward for years. Until now, London could rely on New York as a backstop. COMEX inventory acted as the emergency reserve. That reserve just became inaccessible. This creates a market bifurcation. 2 prices, 2 realities, 2 entirely separate silver markets. Silver in the United States, silver in the United Kingdom. And soon, wildly different prices. Let me be very clear, this is not theoretical. We already saw the first shockwave. On Friday, just before the announcement, 4.2 million ounces were withdrawn from COMEX vaults in a single day. That's not retail demand. That's not coincidence. That's panic logistics. It looks very much like an emergency move to save London. A last-minute extraction before the door slammed shut. Except now, the door is closed, and that silver is effectively grounded, unable to be exported without triggering the tariff. In other words, the US may have just accidentally created a domestic strategic silver reserve. Not by design, by consequence. Now think about what this does to the banks, because bullion banks don't operate regionally. They run global books. Their hedges rely on New York and London prices staying aligned. That alignment just broke. This introduces something extremely dangerous for banks: basis risk. Basis risk is when 2 supposedly identical assets stop tracking each other, when the hedge doesn't hedge, when the offset fails. If silver trades at $90 in New York and $110 in London, every short position tied to that spread starts bleeding. Banks now face a choice: do nothing and absorb losses, or cover shorts aggressively. Either way, upward pressure explodes. Now layer in refiners. Because refiners don't care about paper prices. They care about replacement cost. If they're operating in tariff-affected regions, their input costs just rose overnight. That cost gets passed down the chain to wholesalers, to dealers, to end buyers, which means physical premiums in the US rise even further, even if the COMEX spot price doesn't move. This is how the spot price becomes meaningless, an average of broken markets, a number with no relevance to real acquisition. And that brings us to the most important implication of all. The idea of a single global silver price is over. From here on out, silver will be priced regionally, based on local availability, local trade barriers, local demand, local politics. That is resource nationalism, and it is accelerating. Countries are learning the same lesson at the same time. Critical materials cannot be trusted to global markets. They must be held at home. This tariff isn't an anomaly. It's a signal, a first domino. And once countries start hoarding, once logistics break down, once arbitrage fails, price suppression becomes impossible. Not illegal, not immoral, just too risky. Banks don't stop suppressing prices because they grow a conscience. They stop because the math stops working. And right now, the math is screaming. So what does this mean for you? First, Forget geographic diversification. That era is over. Keeping metal overseas introduces risk, not safety. Second, stop obsessing over the spot price. It no longer reflects reality. Replacement cost is the only number that matters. And third, most importantly, understand this. The U.S. tariff has unintentionally rigged the game in favor of domestic physical holders. Volatility will be violent, headlines will be confusing, prices will whip. But directionally, the trajectory is clear. This is not a conspiracy. It's logistics, it's policy, it's math. And it's happening whether people understand it or not. Stay with the original. Because this story isn't being copied yet, it's being missed. And in part 2, we're going to talk about what happens next, how fast this can escalate, and why this tariff may have permanently ended silver price suppression as we know it. Now let's talk about what happens next. Because this is where things stop being abstract and start getting very real very fast. Once a market is split, once logistics break and arbitrage dies, pressure doesn't leak out slowly. It builds, and then it releases all at once. The first thing you will see is price divergence acceleration. London will not drift gently higher. It will gap. Because the LBMA doesn't have enough metal to satisfy industrial demand without US inflows, that lifeline is gone. When London inventories fall below critical thresholds, bullion banks will face a brutal choice. Do they let clients default, or do they pay any price to source metal? Historically, when markets reach this point, banks choose survival. They bid aggressively, desperately, publicly. This is how you get $10, $15, even $20 daily moves. Not because of speculation, but because there are no sellers. No one with metal wants paper, and no one with paper can find metal. Next comes policy reaction, because once prices explode regionally, governments notice, not because investors are winning, but because manufacturers start screaming. Solar producers, defense contractors, electronics firms, medical suppliers. Silver is not optional. You cannot substitute it away. When input prices spike uncontrollably, production halts. And when production halts, politicians panic. That's when you'll hear new phrases enter the public conversation. Temporary market stabilization, strategic resource coordination, emergency trade measures, translated, restrictions, interventions, controls. And that leads to the third phase, official acknowledgement that the spot price is broken. This usually happens quietly at first, a delayed auction, a suspended mint sale, a technical issue with delivery. Then it becomes obvious. Dealers stop quoting prices, premiums explode, availability vanishes. At that point, the conversation shifts from price to access. Can you get it? Not how cheap it is. This is why physical possession matters. Not ETFs, not unallocated accounts, not promises. Because when markets fracture, contracts get rewritten, and paper always loses. Now let's address the biggest misconception people have at moments like this. They assume high volatility means danger, but volatility isn't the threat. Illiquidity is. Volatility just tells you the system is trying to reprice something that has been mispriced for a long time. Illiquidity tells you the system may fail to deliver at any price. We are moving from the first to the second, and tariffs accelerate that transition. This isn't about Greenland, it's about trade routes, supply chains, control. Silver just happens to be caught in the middle. That's why this channel focuses on logistics, not hype. Because charts react after systems break. Logistics tell you before. So here's the bottom line. The global silver market no longer functions as a single market. The mechanisms that suppressed price are broken. The walls are up, the exits are narrowing. From here forward, silver will trade like oil during a supply shock. Regional pricing, political premiums, sudden scarcity. And if you hold physical metal where you live, you're not speculating, you're positioned. Because when the dust settles, the question won't be, did you buy at the perfect price? It will be, did you have access at all? Stay with the original. Because this isn't a trend, it's a structural shift. And once markets fracture, they don't heal quickly. They reset. We're watching that reset in real time, and most people won't understand it until the price tells them they have no choice.